we have with us, I have with me my dear friend Grace Potts. Welcome, Grace. And Grace
Hi,
is,
glad to be here.
yay, among other things, uh, Grace is the founder and homemaker for St. Ambrose Catholic Worker. Um, so Grace, tell us a little bit about the Catholic Worker movement and um, what you're doing for community in Ypsilanti, and then we'll dive into the Gaza issue.
Sure, sure. So the Catholic Worker Movement was started by Dorothy Day and Peter Morin in the United States in the 30s, the 1930s. And it's a radical hospitality movement. She started by just welcoming houseless people into her home for shelter and offering food, really just these very basic sorts of ministry. Um, because Dorothy Day and Peter Morin were trying to live their faith radically.
Mm.
So they sheltered and fed and clothed the homeless, the hungry, and those without clothes, the naked. And it's kind of a big movement, but also a quiet movement. You may never have heard of us. Um, and it's we like it that way. It's a word of mouth thing. It's you have to know each other. Typically, Catholic workers do not have a 501c3. Some do, some don't, because we're anarchists, kind of first and foremost. So some are religious, some are not. Some are very Catholic, some are interfaith, some are connected to the Catholic worker in name only, as in they're affiliated and they really do their own thing as to how they do it. Like what they may be doing direct actions, they may be doing hospitality, they may be doing food drives. It's a wide variety of ways to serve radically and directly the needs of the poor.
Mm.
Um, there's a few here in Southeast Michigan. There are a lot of needs here. Most of us are equally quiet, doing our thing, and have our circle of connections and people. But here, I think we've got 4 houses that do emergency hospitality. Oh, well, 2 houses that do emergency hospitality, 1 that does long term, and all 4 of us do outreach from food, clothing, job assistance, helping people fill out forms. Um, One of them helps run a day shelter and a cooling center in the summer and a warming center in the winter. So a variety of supports like that. And as a group, we see what's happening in Gaza as inextricably connected to the work we do every day,
Mm.
whether it be disarmament, direct action, or feeding hungry people.
Yeah, so I know you've had the Palestinian issue on your radar longer than a lot of people I know. How did you first find out about it, and what have been your commitments, prior to 2023?
I have to say, the first time I've known that there was a conflict for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
The first time I really did a deep dive and got fully educated on the issue, um, I think that was 2003 when Rachel Corrie was killed,
Mm.
an American citizen who was trying to prevent the demolition of a Palestinian home. And I wouldn't say it radicalized me because, I've had lots of leanings, and it was kind of like just broadly like, well, I support the little guy, I support the indigenous people there. That was my perspective. And I didn't like think deeply about it further than
Mhm.
that. Um, I did feel some conflicts as a person who's ethnically Jewish, a Sephardi. I felt some conflict, like maybe I should feel for. Of course, you should feel for all sides and both people, but like, who needs to be liberated in this situation? I've
Mm.
always thought it was the Palestinians. But with that deep dive in 2003, and I think I never fully appreciated the depth and the breadth of the inequities in the situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of
I
sense.
think,
Yeah. Okay.
one more time.
No, I was just saying it makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of I think a lot of allies have gone through that process of, oh yeah, it seems like something's unequal,
but
but actually
but
getting
really,
what it, but really how, to what
how,
extent and in
to
what
what extent it
ways.
is,
Um,
right? Um, yeah, yeah, that was 2003 for me, and since that time, um, I like to do a lot of the work I do anonymously, but I've supported materially and personally various groups from primarily Michigan Peace Team and sending people over to take um, video footage and really do person to person reportage on what's happening on the ground there. In not just in Gaza, but in all the occupied territories in the West Bank, and really have a close up look at what the settler movement is doing and
mm,
what that looks like and what the apartheid state looks like when you're in Israel.
mm,
And so I didn't go myself, but I've supported and hosted folks who have to get over there and to come back and to share the story from what they see on the ground themselves as an ordinary citizen.
mm,
Um, that's extremely informative. That's an extremely informative way to get the information. I know that we're in a world where people feel like they have to, um, especially now, especially in 2024, we have to very carefully judge the media that we're looking at and the lens through which we're getting our information.
mm,
Um, Talking to people who grew up there, Palestinians and Israelis, talking to people who visited there, and a lot of folks went there with the perspective that I had in 2002 and left with a deeply radicalized and informed perspective. They were
mm,
kind of like, I understand there's a conflict here, it seems unequal, but it kind of opened their eyes in an irreversible way to actually go there and see it.
mhm,
And the thing that I think a lot of people found most intense was to actually witness in the 21st century um, legal apartheid.
mhm,
People who have different legal systems applied to their bodies and their lives, their work and their homes, but members of the same society. Um, that was just deeply shocking.
mhm.
That that's still reality somewhere, anywhere. Um, Especially a place that we frequently refer to as a democracy. So yeah,
Yeah,
but that's been a lot of our work, a lot of our my personal engagement over the last years. And you learn a lot of things in this real deep way, like the way you know your chosen family, right? These are people who they're only telling you because they think you should know, and
mm,
they bring back lived stories rather than media stories, if that makes sense.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. I definitely got a much deeper sense of the inequality when I started to have a Palestinian close friend and talking to her, but also reading some of the things that the information she was sharing that I wasn't seeing anywhere else.
Anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Um,
And
yeah,
there's an irony there, right? You don't see it anywhere else, so maybe there's something I don't know. And the stories around or the understanding around how media gets shared and how media gets shaped. That's a deep dive that people need to do in addition to um, just listening, right? Um, yeah,
yeah.
understanding why the media narrative is the way it is.
So I
Yeah.
think so. I came up with three questions. I forgot one of them.
Oh,
Oh, nope. I remembered. I re-remembered.
yay.
And it's probably the best one. So I'll go to that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you are Jewish on one side and African on the other side. And so
Yep.
you have a personal connection. I've noticed that a lot of a lot of shocking things have happened in post-colonial Africa. And
Yes.
and I know I don't identify with them as much
Oh,
as,
right. Yeah.
a white Jewish American. I'm like, okay,
Right.
maybe those people are just really like fundamentally different. And then when I see, people who look not only like me but exactly like me,
Right.
um, committing shocking atrocities with with my money, um,
And
it
yeah,
really jars me more. But from your perspective, I know that you've been really attentive to things that have gone on in Africa. How would you? I don't know if I want to say compare and contrast, but like, how has having that perspective prepared you for what's happening now? Maybe to be less of a shock, or is there something inherent, unique or different about this 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 form of genocide? Or
right, right. I will say it's been less of a shock to me. It's been less of a shock to me.
yeah.
Um, um, I think I've seen like three responses in the Jewish community. I've seen sort of four. So there are white Jews who've been part of Jewish Voice for Peace, who've been part of um, the the far left of Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
and have been working on this for decades. And they're not shocked. They're like, we need to do something 20 years ago, right? So this would never happen. So they're
Mm-hmm.
not shocked. There's also a space of uh, like sort of shock and horror amongst a lot of white Jews. Just like, what? How?
Yeah.
And then there are Jews of color who are kind of reluctant to say a lot of what they might think because they don't want to lose their access to what are overwhelmingly white spaces
Mm.
because of the conflict that will raise. So they're very reticent. And then there are Jews of color who are like, we've been telling you, we've always been telling you that this is a blind side for us.
Mm.
And I count myself in that space that I try to have these conversations with Ashkenazi Jews and European Jews, and there's never been a good time to have the conversation and really um, reflect deeply about who we are as Jews with respect to the state of Israel and what it means and what it should look like, what safety for Jews in the world should look like. We've not been able to have that conversation. We've needed to. And so, to that extent, um, because we couldn't have that conversation, this day was always coming, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's still horrific and overwhelming when you see the photographs and you read the stories.
Even the
But
numbers.
yeah,
I mean, and I know
even
most
the
people
numbers,
can't. I
can't
know
even fathom the numbers,
I'm better at numbers than most people, and I can't fathom
right?
these numbers.
Can't fathom these numbers.
But
Yes, yes.
yeah.
And so there's a way in which um, it's not a shock, it's a disappointment.
Mm.
And with the perspective of, and I think we talked about this a bit when Ukraine blew up in the news, because Ukraine, again, like many places in the world, has been a problem for some time. It didn't all erupt in like 2022. Um, I keep getting recent years, I get confused, but I think it was 2022. It didn't just erupt then. It's been brewing, the current conflict's been brewing since 2014. In that same way, the Congo, the Sudan, um, the border with Rwanda, like people remember the Rwandan genocide. They don't remember, or they don't really think about. So, like, what happened after that? A
Mm.
lot of the spillover that we're seeing down the Congo has its roots in what was occurring in the Rwandan genocide.
30 years ago.
Um, yeah, 30 years ago, right? So these things are not like you see them on your social media feed, and you may even see them in the news now. Um, there really hasn't. It's not brand new. They've been brewing for decades. It's been sort of bubbling under the surface, or not even under the surface, but out of
Out of
Western view,
view.
out of Western view for decades. the oil extraction in the Sudan, resource extraction in the Congo, and the destabilization of Rwanda, where they had some groups um, supported their colonizers, other groups did not, and then they were pit against each other when uh, the colonizing country left. And that was the seeds of their genocide. And the same group that had been working with colonizers before they left now is looking at how to expand their resource reach into the Congo. So those are the dynamics, and it has deep roots. And that's just the Congo. So um, how shall I say? All these things. Oh, yeah, I know how to put this. The things that we see in Africa that we have sort of a cloudy understanding around, right? They are festering in the same way that Israel-Palestine has been festering. And in the same way before it blew up, and you're like shocked to see what happened. History did not begin on October 7th. So when something something's gonna blow up. Something's going to be a huge humanitarian disaster. And it already is, but something that like Western news can't avoid anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Understand it did not start that day. So um, when you hear organizers say these things are all connected, they're all connected, and the connection is they're happening outside of Western view. They're enriching Western people. It benefits us to not know.
Mm.
So there's a very real way, and I know this is probably a future question, but one of the most powerful actions you can take is to do your own learning.
Mm.
You have to. I know a lot of us left school, and we're happy to be without homework. But it's actually really, really valuable to continue to be a lifelong learner and to understand the broader picture of things that you see in the media, because Africa is festering the same way that Gaza was festering, and the loss of life was ongoing. And I have to say, it's the numbers that we've seen since October 7th are breathtaking. They outstrip the initial colonization of Palestine in 1948. I think twofold.
Uh,
And that was already understood to be,
Officially, the official numbers, yes,
the
about
official
double,
numbers already outstrip that.
about double, yeah.
And uh, and that was already understood to be the worst thing that ever happened.
Right.
It was all so the Nakba was already understood to be in this place like it was unspeakable violence, and this doubles that,
Triples it
and
in this
triples it.
one.
Pardon me. Yes,
In total, triples it in total.
in
Yeah.
total, right? And so we have stories about the Belgian Congo and the horrors that happened in the Belgian Congo. Right now, we're well on our way to dwarfing that in the Congo.
It reminds me of a
Um,
conversation we've had many times
yeah,
about colonization is not over. It just keeps changing
it just
forms,
keeps changing. It just
which,
keeps changing form.
yeah. And I mean, in Israel, Palestine, it's actually still very direct,
It's still very direct.
still very
Well,
direct.
it's still very direct, and yeah, like for example, none of the people that are extracting wealth from the Congo are like sending Westerners to live there, um, unless you count the people that are in management positions and like have to be physically there some part of the year to manage this. But mostly they've installed a, a corporate non-governmental body to engage in these actions on the ground. And and some people will describe these things as civil wars and as civil disagreements between factions there, when in fact it's really about resource extraction, which is it always has been, right? Um, yeah, and just to be very sort of explicit about the situation in Israel, and the thing that I think I really want um, European Jews to understand is that establishing Israel there was not about keeping Jews safe.
Mm.
It was about establishing a beachhead in the region for resource extraction and using Jews to buffer Western society from the
Again.
blowback.
Sorry.
Uh,
I
this
mean,
keeps happening.
sorry.
Right,
For
right?
people who don't know that reference, in the 20th century, as Jews became, working class and upwardly mobile
Hmm.
class, we were used as buffers between the white community and the black community, and that's why there's these stereotypes of the Jewish landlord and the Jewish shopkeeper and
Etc.
etc.
And really, to put that in context for, say, uh, maybe activists that are a little bit younger than us, it's the same thing you see of the model minority that we use for East Asians in the US. It was that same dynamic. So it's a buffer between, um, so people spend time fighting with each other instead of looking at who's harming them and the
Who's
structures that are harming them, right?
yeah. So,
Right. So if we understand that dynamic of what's going on, I think it changes things dramatically when we think about our own safety, right? It doesn't make me safer to be a proxy buffer for someone else. That doesn't make me safer
no, a bulletproof
at
vest
all.
is a buffer.
Is a
Right?
buffer, right? I'm still getting shot at, Yeah, so that's not really the thing we want for ourselves. Even though we love us, we don't want that for us, even if we think we do. Um, yeah, I think that's the one thing I want to say about that for fellow Jews. The but no, this thing where you feel like if I could have 5 minutes on network television to talk about what's happening in Africa, to talk about what several presidential administrations here have set of Africa up for, and how it compares to what we are rightfully horrified by from the 19th century,
Mm.
it would be eye-opening in a similar way that the last 3 months have been eye-opening about the Middle East. Um, and we'd have a very understanding and perspective on what's occurring in Africa.
Mm. Oh.
Um, yeah, yeah. So that's a lot to unpack, but yeah,
No, no,
happy to
no.
take
It definitely has me wanting to do
some
some
more reading.
some more
Yeah,
reading. Exactly.
yeah.
Um, so Grace, another reason I asked you to come speak is that I know that you're really good at noticing what everyone is working on, not just what you're working on. And
Oh, yeah, sure.
yeah, so for people who may be looking, maybe like horrified by what's happening in Gaza, knowing they want to take action, but not really sure where to plug in, can you sketch out what you see is going on in the movement, places where there's access, things like that?
I know this one. I know this one. Okay. So I want to tell you sort of in order of mm, the lowest hanging fruit to the most. So the lowest hanging fruit, is easy to get, but it's the simplest thing. It's not the most satisfying thing. The best fruit is up top. Okay. So we're going to start with the lowest hanging fruit. Um, all of the folks that are probably watching this probably engage in social media. They probably have access to various middle class Western progressive circles. You need to say something. You need to talk about Palestine. You need to give your friends and colleagues permission to speak. Because right now, we're kind of quietly, collectively enforcing a code of silence around it. And so I'm like surrounded by people, I am, that are talking about it. But few of the people that I'm talking to have that around them. Does that make sense? So if you are at home, distraught, the first thing you need to do um, to get away from centering yourself around how much this is affecting you, the thing all of us can do that we need to do is give the people around us permission to speak by speaking ourselves. It's a little bit like the code of silence we've accepted around COVID, right? As soon as someone gives everyone permission to speak, we have our own stories to tell. We can talk about what's affecting us and what we're seeing and how it's impacting us and what we want to do about it. But that can't happen until people feel permission to speak. So that's number one. Number two, um, eSIMs are huge. And I think I mentioned this to you a couple of weeks ago. Um, I will include this in my resource list, honestly, at the top. You can purchase
I've also been
eSIMs.
sending it out in the daily emails, the link to these things.
Fantastic.
But tell
That's
everybody
fantastic.
about them.
It's what it is. It's like an electric SIM card, and allows people there to email out on the very narrow bandwidth that's available. Because the deal is they've shut down communications and like broadband to get like a signal out, to get video and things out. But in order for the IOF and the IDF to communicate with each other, they have to keep like 5% of it open. eSIMs allow them to get on and send messages out, even though they're experiencing a media blackout. So journalists there, people on the ground, they're physicians, doctors, aid workers, they need these eSIMs to continue functioning and maintain contact with the outside world. You can buy them for a modest sum. For really, you can buy. It's similar to like you might buy a phone card to send back home so people can talk overseas. This allows you to do that electronically. You can purchase it. You go to the eSIM's website, give them the code, and they will send it to the folks there on the ground to get their stories out. So you tell their stories, let them tell their stories, and actually the third thing, this is the one that's challenging to get to, but it has the strongest, most lasting impact. You may be aware that some states and some universities and some employers are retaliating against people who speak out against the genocide. And the way people are able to speak out is A, they feel permission to, and B, they need a network to catch them. So I want you to find any and all mutual aid groups in your community and get involved. You have to get involved because going forward, we're going to need to be there. We're going to need to be a safety net to catch each other. That's the only way people can continue to speak out.
And how are people how are these mutual aid groups? Where do people find them? Like I've been in some, but I've started some, but I don't really know how
Mm-hmm.
to find one, right? Unless a friend says, oh, by the
Right?
way, my mutual aid group.
Oh, I remember I'm a homemaker, so let me just attend to one thing. I'm on a Zoom call right now, baby. Give me a second. Great. Thank you. I'll be back. The That's one of my kitties. Um, so mutual aid, that's the blessing and the curse of anarchism. We don't have a phone book, right? Um, we kind of do, but we don't really have a phone book strictly. So if you are on Facebook, you should look for mutual aid, your county, your state, your city, town. Okay? A good place to ask about mutual aid is find a local Buy Nothing group and ask if anybody's engaged in mutual aid there.
Hmm.
Um,
I was also thinking if you
those are great places
have
to look.
anarchist friends locally, ask them what they're up to.
Yes, actually,
Actually,
that was my third
I
point.
think I know who to ask now that I said that.
Right. So you know who your anarchist friends are. And if you don't have anarchist friends, get yourself some. You need some. And ask them what they're up to and tell them that you want to engage in mutual aid. And if they are feeling burnt out, they will jump to the ready to help get some mutual aid going. Or they will tell you precisely where to plug in. So it's a little bit word of mouth. You can find some places on the internet. But really, start with a search for mutual aid and your community name, whether it's the county, the state, or the city, or municipality.
Mm.
That will get you going. And again, it's simple, but it's not easy. Mutual aid is simple, but not easy. And that's the direction you want to go to be here for the long haul. Because I don't think what needs to happen will happen in the next 2 weeks. So you're going to need to be ready to support each other. And yeah, Those are my 3 steps. Those are 3 things.
And what's your view of rallies? Like I'd kind of gotten tired of rallies and thought that they didn't do anything. And like the ubiquity of the rallies on this issue, Jewish Voice for Peace rallies, Palestinian organized rallies for Gaza, and the bridge closings and the interrupting speeches and all of that, um,
Mhm.
is giving me a little bit of hope. Like when everybody's doing it everywhere all the time, seems like it's having some degree of influence.
I think so. Well, I think it is in this regard alone. If it's big enough, you get in the news, and the people watching know they're not alone. That's huge. That's huge, because you can really start to question yourself if you're watching the news and thinking this isn't okay. You've read anything, you think this isn't okay, and you feel siloed. So I think there is value in these actions, the rallies, the marches. Actually, I'm going to separate the two. There's rallies and marches, right? And I think that is edifying if they're large enough to get some coverage. I think it's edifying if you have the opportunity to meet each other. It's huge to meet each other when you didn't know each other before. It's incredible to meet each other and to organize together. And and I think it's important. You've got to understand that for everything that we think we're going through as activists here, it's nothing compared to what they're facing every day in Gaza. And
Of course.
the way that we stay engaged is to have each other long term. And you know what? Give me 1 second here. I've got some noise in the background, and I'm gonna just see if
Let me know when we're back.
I'm back. My 7-year-old is still celebrating her birthday party. She had those noisemakers. She's still
Oh, the
celebrating.
kazoo, sort of the birthday.
Yes, yes. So
Well,
it was a good party.
my
What can I
cat
say?
has her noises as well. Um,
Yes.
okay, so
The
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was saying something about
Oh, rally.
rallies and okay. Yes. So the rallies, they're huge for like connecting with each other, and that connection is how we sustain our energy to do what needs to be done. The disruptions, the rallies and marches are one thing. The disruptions are very important, actually. Disrupting business as usual. I mean, if you disrupt enough, people will change what they're doing to stop getting disrupted. That's actually what brought South Africa down. The disruptions became so much and so frequent, they could not afford to continue apartheid. And that's what brought the South African regime down. It took a long time, but consistent and focused, targeted disruptions made it unsustainable to continue. So those disruptive actions, those are significant. Stopping traffic, significant. Um, and we need to be prepared for the state to react strongly to those actions because they're disruptive. Um, if you're not in a position to put your body on the line, and a lot of us aren't, um, boycotts and divestment work really well. That's also disruptive.
Mm.
Um, they're very effective as collective actions. And then there was like a third thing you mentioned, so like rallies, disruptions.
Oh, interrupting speeches and things like that.
Oh, interrupting speeches and things like that. Again, I think if you can't go anywhere as a public official at a leverage point without getting interrupted, that's going to change something. I think in the short term it will change security. In the long term, they will change policy because and this is where the mutual aid comes in. There are going to be people who can't get into the event anymore, right? You'll need to have new people ready to get into the event and interrupt things. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yep,
really,
yep,
you've got to be thinking about long term. It's not that one action; it's the 100 actions that start to tip the scales.
yes. And gosh, I don't know. This is so
Yeah,
emergency that thinking long term feels inherently creepy, and we've got to hold out longer than them.
we've got a whole lot longer than them. That's the bottom line. We have to hold out longer than they can, and there's more of us than there are of them, so we can, but we've got to have each other's backs.
Super clear. So, last thing, tell us about your free gift.
Oh, email me for a list of resources, please. Please, I would love it. I'd be glad to send it to you. So I'm going to have stuff about eSIMs on there. I'm going to have stuff like some historical links for you to read and learn more, some connections for you to make so you can continue to read and learn more, and and be your own information powerhouse and share with others and offer a new perspective to other people. Um, and I'll also have some resources for getting engaged in mutual aid. Um, I don't think we fully appreciate how much this will mean to us in the long run.
Thank you for that.
So that's, yeah.
Well, always wonderful to be with you, Grace. Thank you for your wisdom, your perspective, and for creating a space for people's creativity. It really makes a difference.
It is a privilege. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.